Welcome to On My Couch. My co-host Sue and I started this a couple of years ago now. This is episode number 30. And what we wanted to do was talk with really interesting people and really smart people about particular topics that interest us, that might help us in our work life and sometimes in our personal life as well. So a couple of introductions. So I'll get Sue to introduce herself in a minute. My name's Damien. I'm the founder of OMC Group. And what we do is we help people work better together. Fundamentally, the outcome that we're looking for is people achieving more, people achieving what's possible, and people delivering optimal performance. So we do that through leadership development, culture, team effectiveness. And in November last year, we celebrated 15 years in business, which is a really cool milestone. So, Sue, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Damien, and happy 2026, our first on my couch for
Yes.
2026, which is
Yep.
great. As you said, we've done a few of these now, so we've sort of got them, I suppose, into a little bit of a tighter order than when we
Yep.
first started. But nonetheless, it's always good, as you said, to meet really good and interesting people. My background is obviously in retail property, having worked for Westfield for over 30 plus years, and now having what they call, I think, an intermittent career where I do a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and sometimes just a whole pile of just reading and learning. So I'm really excited to talk to Georgia today.
Cool. Thank you. And Georgia, I'll do a quick intro, but then I'll ask you to sort of add to it as we go. So, as I said, this is episode number 30. Quite often in these conversations, we talk a lot about sort of leadership and culture and organizational performance. And certainly in a couple of the conversations, we've touched on that concept of psychological safety, and psychological health and safety. But, we thought as it was such an important topic and it's emerging and it's still emerging. And I think there's a number of us that are still trying to get our heads around it, fully. So we thought we'd ask Georgia Gray as our special guest. So Georgia, thank you so much. I'll let you add to this, but currently psychological health education lead, previously Workwell program officer, both with WorkSafe Victoria, psychological wellbeing practitioner with the Department of Education, facilitator Ways of Wellness Foundation. Keen to hear a little bit more about what that is, and originally a mental health nurse with Barwon Health. So some great expertise there. So thank you so much for joining us. And before we go any further, maybe just tell us a little bit more about your story.
Thank you so much, Damien, Sue. And I really appreciate you inviting me to be on the couch with you both. I think it's great because I'm also 30, so I'm joining the 30th episode. The
So
irony
are Sue
there.
and I. We're
Yeah,
30
they're
as well.
perfect, perfect.
Yeah, yeah.
But no, thank you. I feel privileged when you say intelligent people. So thank you for getting me on here. But I guess my journey, I've always been really deeply motivated by mental health, supporting people and the community. And my journey didn't really start in the traditional way. I actually originally dropped out of high school, so to become an academic wasn't really in my pathway. But I was always really fueled by the determination to make a difference, especially in mental health. And I began my career first by doing an advanced diploma at the Gordon in Geelong,
Mhm.
and I became a mental health nurse. And really working with individuals and families, working within their recovery, I really became compassionate about clinical care, but I couldn't ignore what the bigger truth was. And people were seeking support, but a lot of their seeking wasn't for their own benefit. It was also the impact of larger systems issues that was creating their barriers to actually thriving in the community.
Mhm.
And then that created an opportunity for me to look at the systems that were meant to support people, but they actually contributed to maybe doing more harm without meaning to. And that inspired me to then go back and do my health promotion and public health degree at La Trobe. Then kind of going from there, I was on placement. I was a part of a part of the education department. And going full loop, I was like, okay, I'm back seeing this system was also impacting teachers, teaching staff, and also impacting workplaces. So not just individuals that I was supporting that were students, but also the staff I started to support and develop programs for. So I was like, where can I go from here? I
Mhm.
was like, WorkSafe. WorkSafe's the perfect place to actually support small to medium businesses and start developing policies and programs that protect people at work. And so now I've been at WorkSafe for 4 years.
Mhm.
And I've been a part of the recent introduction of the psych health regs that have just gone live. And that's why it's great to have this series starting right
Mm.
now. We just had the legislation drop on December the 3rd, 2025. So
Ah,
it's critical. And it's like where I wanted to work is more in that proactive prevention, but help support businesses where they can thrive and their employees.
cool.
Yeah. So a bit of a journey.
Yeah, that's an interesting journey.
Yeah. And I think it's just like psychological health is something that has now changed since COVID. I
Mm.
think we all now have the language as individuals to speak more openly about our mental health, but
Yep.
then looking at the system that we work within, how can we control some of the outcomes for people?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I noticed you use the term psychological health and mental health. Um, are they the same? Are they different? What's the definitions, I suppose, a layman's definition?
I really like this question, Sue. And I think that's where we need to break down the barrier of language. So, psychological health and safety speaks to the system that we work within, where mental health is a term that we can use interchangeably as individuals when we refer to our own mental health or mental well-being. Psychological health looks at the broader system and is a clinical term, but also then can be looked at in that occupational term. And it actually refers to when we maintain a work environment that protects and promotes a person's mental health whilst working. Um, and it looks at the importance of psychological health is now in the same field as physical safety.
Mm.
Here we go. Okay.
Uh,
So, Georgia, I'm curious to understand whether it's being this psychological health and safety is being driven by public or private enterprise, and are there any specific sectors within those two that are more advanced or less advanced?
Great question, Sue. Thank you. When we're looking at the sectors and across industry, all of the state are mandated to report back on this. So private or public, everyone who pays their insurance are part of the demographic and the influence of being able to advance their practice and the way they look after their staff. But this also doesn't, just because you pay your insurance doesn't mean you're good at psychological health and safety at work. The differences between motivation are actually around industries that probably see a lot more high exposure to trauma or high exposure to impacts of mental health at work. So you wouldn't be surprised to see healthcare, emergency services, our large gov services and corporate services are actually doing a lot better and are more advanced with their psychological health practices due to the regulatory approach that we have in the community, but also the impacts that they're seeing more regular, and it's been on their radar for a lot longer. But we would say it's still important for our private enterprise and also our small businesses. I think, Damien, you understand this, being in a smaller business,
Mm.
you have limited resources. The opportunity to get the awareness or the training is limited too because you're supporting yourself.
Yep.
And so we would see maybe some of those impacts more to construction, the gig economy, so people who are self-employed, and
Mm.
then smaller businesses are being less advanced. It doesn't mean that they're lacking motivation. They do want to do well for their employees and their business because it means good business. But I guess that educational opportunity is more limited.
Yep.
And then we've got, I think the emerging focus from public and private would be your tech sectors and education for teaching staff, where stress and fatigue are becoming increasingly recognised since COVID.
Yeah, cool. So we might come back to sort of that more sort of macro or organizational type of stuff, but maybe if we go back to you, can back, circle
Yeah.
back on your story because you've done a great job of the environment, and the legislative environment and why it's becoming increasingly an area of focus. Maybe back to you, and I'm going to read a quote from your own LinkedIn profile. Yeah. We do extensive research here, Sue and I, and so I was looking at, and so I'm going to read it. The quote is, at the core, my mission is to foster a culture where health and safety are paramount, interweaving trauma-informed care knowledge and a passion for nurturing inclusive spaces. we've set a precedent for proactive and innovative approaches to mental health practices. So clearly a lot of passion coming through there, which is fantastic, which is really, really good. But there was a couple of things I suppose I just wanted to understand a little bit more. That trauma-informed care knowledge. Could you expand on that a little bit? Is that, yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a great area of work that we can talk to. And I think
Yeah.
trauma-informed practice is such a human approach that we could all embody and know more about when we're working with people or when we're working in the community. So trauma-informed care first came to my wheelhouse to say when I was nursing in my clinical role. But when I started working in corporate settings and working with individuals, I started understanding, wow, this trauma-informed practice can be underpinned in the systems that we work in.
Mm-hmm.
So there's 3 levels of trauma-informed practice.
Okay.
So you can start with being trauma aware, so understanding that trauma impacts individuals, being aware that it's within our community. And then you can look at trauma responsive. So that's that next pillar where you're advancing your understanding, which that goes beyond the awareness, and you can go and apply yourself to understanding more knowledge and training that can help create the foundations, which is trust, compassion, empowerment, and most importantly, choice.
Mm-hmm.
So when we look at choice, and this can really feed into the way our leaders and in our leadership style, when we allow choice for individuals, they actually are able to regain control in their decision-making processes and the decision in their work life.
Yeah.
And which, when we engage in this, can prioritize empowerment and respect and build an equal amount of trust. So it's almost like when you have choice at the forefront of decision-making, the rest follows, and you can have really genuine impact and outcomes. But when we apply these to our systems as well, when we go from individual to system, when you empower choice, it goes a long way with building inclusivity. So that long-term communication. And I just feel like trauma-informed practice, when it's done well, can mitigate harm for individuals when we're looking at co-design in programs, when we're looking like working with different staff, and then even when we're reflecting back to like our sporting events. I think it can really empower individuals how they shape, how they show up, but also it underpins a cultural safety. So that kind of bridged my trauma-informed practice into psychological health and safety. Yeah.
And it's interesting when you think about some of those, those words, they're pretty foundational words. I mean, you talked about trust, you talked about compassion, you talked about empowerment. I mean, they're pretty, they're
pretty human, aren't they?
That's right. And they're not really new, I don't think. I don't think so. So it's interesting.
And I think that's what it is. I think when we put fancy words to it, it's actually just stripping it back and going back to the basics.
Yeah.
And how we actually, if we have them at the forefront,
Yeah.
we don't leave anyone behind, which is always great.
Hopefully you don't mind me saying this, Sue, but when on one of our previous episodes, you may or may not remember this, but we talked about psychological safety, and I think and I was doing my best. George has done it way better than I could do, to talk about psychological safety, and when I explained it, you said, "Well, isn't that just good management and good leadership?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, why do we have to make it so complex?" So.
I think that's what it is. I think
Yeah.
I'm so grateful to be on the show and talk about it today, because I think the complex nature is when we look at the system, but when we strip it back, the system's built up of people.
Yeah.
And I think we can then integrate it from that lens. And I think it makes it more achievable for businesses, because it's obviously when we have that leadership buy-in, when we can change it from the top, everyone can come along for the ride, which,
I'm going to ask you one more question, and then I'll hand over to Sue, because I think she's got a couple lined up as well. But so my last question for you is coming up to you is, clearly you're passionate. You've done the studies. You've spent 13 years. So just what ignited that passion? Was there an event? Did you see the benefit of when we do this? Right. What keeps you that drive, energy going for you?
Oh, that is such a good question. I think for me, underpinning it all is lived experience. I have living experience of being a carer of people with mental health, directly in my family. And that underpinned it to begin with. But
Yep.
then the supporting evidence that I see the benefit in our community most weeks. And I think
Yeah.
that's what's kept me so motivated at work is understanding the importance. If you can do it for just one person and their family, how much it can actually impact the community and that broader impact. And it's an industry that's always changing. I never get bored. Innovation is there, and I think we're always learning more. The research is adapting. We understand that the impact to individuals with the innovation and impact to businesses also keeps it really interesting for myself.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Right.
And so from an organizational point of view and best practice, what does that look like? So we've talked about the theory of it, but how do you then, how does it, how does the rubber hit the road, so to speak?
Sorry, I'm a bit slow right now. Getting to my notes.
You did some prep. That's sensational.
I did some prep.
That's awesome.
I think when we're looking at best practice, and I really understand, like, best practice is where WorkWell used to sit. So the business model that I used to work across was when we were working with organizations and leadership. That's where you can make the broader impact. And looking at, I think sometimes when we look at compliance and OHS, yes, there's that legislation that's become really important since December 1st, but going beyond that is where you see the impact with people. So the rubber hitting the road is like looking at leadership practice. How can you embed like looking at the practices you can have with your staff? It goes beyond the policies and procedures. It's actually looking at the culture of leadership, leaders who model that almost trauma-informed lens, that empowerment culture of fairness, behaviors of respect and understanding inclusivity. Having diversity across your leadership as well can really help, having different voices at the table and model a best practice lens. And when organizations do it well, it has that positive domino effect with a stronger workforce, but also stronger communities and better outcomes. And then it's quite interesting, the research, when you look at psychosocial hazards, and if they're not managed, they have a quick impact of having a ripple effect for not just one individual, but can impact a whole team. And when you mitigate clusters, you can actually have a impact of picking up most of your hazards. So when you're trying to like mitigate one risk or hazard, it can help you pick up a lot of them at the same time. That's what I'm trying to say, I guess.
So I suppose just from a very commercial point of view, the ROI of OH&S is quite easily measured with, lost time injuries and comparisons and what have you. So what would be a sort of an ROI? Is less sick days, cultural surveys being more positive? What would an ROI look like to know that you've actually achieved a psychological safe work environment where people feel included, trusted, and have that choice? How do you quantify it, or
Absolutely.
can you quantify it?
You can, and I think that's when you record and look at, I guess, looking at the ROI in the broader community. It takes people 5 times longer to return to work with a psychological health injury. So that in itself, you think about the length of the claim and you think the length of person off work. But then when you look at the individual business KPIs that you can monitor, you can look at things like exit interviews, the lag of your compensation rates, but also looking at more nuance. So if you can send out pulse surveys, monitoring things monthly, being able to get ahead, which understanding the job role and work controls and getting feedback early, which builds a culture of safe sharing and people can report back up knowing that they're allowed to give feedback. They're able to co-design the workforce with you. I know it doesn't sound like it's not new if you've been in the industry for a long time, but I think shaping people's workplaces and giving your employees the voice to have a say on what's happening and actually trying to solve the issues that are presenting in their workplace has better return on investment as well.
And one final question, and then I'll let Damien ask the next one. I'm a whistleblower protection officer for one of the boards that I'm on. Is that the place of last resort for people that feel that they have nowhere else to go?
And this is, I think for me, it's just even hits a chord because I'm like, that shouldn't be the resort. Like we should proactively have the system of reporting already embedded in a workplace. If you don't have those systems, at least then there needs to be the reporting between a leader and an individual. And if not, then there should be an employee support service offered to your team so they can actually call a counselling service and seek support, which we now have available within Victoria. I think now, and even as simple as complaint boxes. I know that if you have an industry that's low advanced, but there needs to be an opportunity for people to report back. I think that's a part of the legislation, especially Fair Work as well. People need the opportunity to report back to their business, especially if harm's occurring. But there's also, if you are at that endpoint, you can call advisory. So we also have those services within Victoria. But I know you're in Sydney. So looking at Comcare or those larger organisations that support the work health and safety line.
Thank you.
And even though, can I just pick up on that a minute, George, even though we're talking about Victoria, I mean, I would imagine whilst there's differences, but there's a common, this would be equally present and that might not be specifically what WorkSafe Victoria does, but there'll be similar organisations in other states that'll be tackling the same sort of, focus areas.
Absolutely. We have national law as well as state-based workplace health. So it's called workplace health and safety legislation in other states. We're the only other state that calls it occupational health and safety. But psychological health has been changing in the last 5 years, which going from
cool,
good to do to have to do.
And it's interesting. I mean, then we could spend hours on this. I'm almost curious about, in some ways it's almost heartbreaking that we had to shift to the have to do, because it just makes logical sense to have have a work environment where people are trusted and empowered and the like. So that leads on to, I'm going to talk about, ask you to think about leadership and culture, which is what, Sue and I are I think we're all interested in, to be honest. So, if you think about, leadership, and I spend a lot of time with leaders, from your perspective, what does this mean in terms of how leaders lead? So, i.e., what do they need to do more of or less of, do you think? So if you're a leader in a business and you think, actually, you know what, I need to turn up the volume on psychological safety, what do I need to do more of or less of, do you think?
I love this question. I also feel like I'm still learning my leadership journey, Damien. I don't know if you could tell, but I think when I sit within my team, and I was just trying to reflect on this question, when we go through a significant change period, or roles are changing or things are happening outside work for my team, I think, what can I do for them? And I go back to those trauma-informed principles of safety, trustworthiness, choice, collaboration, and empowerment. And I kind of make my 5 non-negotiables. I'm like, we need clarity. Clarity is kindness when we're in the workplace. I think clear goals, roles, priorities, and workload boundaries are really clear. Fairness, I think consistent decision-making and explaining the why, not just the what, can really help people feel empowered in what decisions are being made. I think I've spoke to care, which kind of comes back to those trauma-informed, but noticing early signs of strain and act before crisis or stress does overload the team. Giving a voice back to the team, which also aligns with the legislation, which they call consultation, but consultation really means empowering the voice of your team and giving them the choice and agency to invite challenge ideas, respond without defensiveness, be able to call out different opportunities for growth within the team. And I think following through as a leader is really important. So closed loop on issues, being visible, timely actions if you don't know. But these are all things I think you and Sue could probably teach me on. and have a lot of experience in.
Yeah, I mean, and I
think
think that's again, it's sort of that's the common theme that's coming through for this discussion. It's like this is not new, right? This is just great, or not even great. This is just good, healthy leadership. That's what we're, so, yeah, I love it. I
I
love
think I think I really wanted to, because I'm such a practical person. I think it
it.
comes from my nursing degree.
Mm.
I wanted to leave the listeners with something practical to do
Yep,
if they're in this leading role.
yep,
So I think like expectation hygiene, you could do like the top 3 things for the week and what can
yep,
wait. Probably already do that. Those micro check-ins, 15 minutes focused just on workload, not just the well-being small talk. Because
yep,
I think, as you know, I've spoken about well-being so importantly, but when we're talking about the systems of psychological health, that's when it comes back to workload expectations.
yep,
That's what's causing the strain, not an individual's ability to manage the strain.
yep. Okay.
And being really having that decision transparency and then that team pulse. Pulse surveys are amazing. You don't want it to be survey overload.
No.
So try and embed it really fun way. You can do it with your monthly check-ins or check in on those demands, controls, and support and the role
Yep,
clarity. Really checking in around those hazards so you can mitigate them early.
yep. Cool. Sue, do you want to?
So I think you've probably summed it up, but
Mm.
if we do a fast three as opposed to a fast five, but fast three in terms of a psych safety for dummies, what's the one question that you get asked most often?
Okay, psych safety for dummies, and that's okay because we're all in this together.
Yeah.
80% of us are trying our best at this.
Yeah.
So why does it matter? Why
Mm-hmm.
Is it my responsibility? I'm just their manager.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not meant to be their clinician. Is a
Right.
question we get often.
Yeah.
To answer that question is we're not asking you to start counseling them. Actually, we're asking the opposite. We're asking you to ask questions around the workplace and then offer and refer on if they need additional support that is outside the workplace. Being able to have healthy conversations as a leader actually prevents mental health harm in the long run. It's just how can we help build that confidence?
Okay.
In asking these questions.
Second question, what's the biggest myth or misconception about psych safety today?
If people are mentally tough enough, we won't need to change the work.
Right. Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because reality, individual resilience really does matter, but psychosocial safety and risk is created by the work and how it's designed and led. I know you can offer yoga and fruit bowls, but that won't support the chronic overload of work. And this is a myth that we get, but also I think that coming back to that clarity and speed of response, how can we mitigate these conversations as early as we can?
Yeah, I was thinking that when you were answering the question before, you can't sort of wallpaper over it with some yoga and some free fruit and some what have you. That there if people think that's probably a solution, then they've probably got bigger underlying issues that they're probably unconsciously aware of, but they haven't really faced up to them. So I think that's a great call out, because you often see workplaces that, we do free yoga and we do this and we do that. You go, well, comes back to your
what else is happening?
Yeah, what else is happening? Yeah. And the last question, very in our quick three, was what do you wish you had learned earlier?
I think leadership is a repair. I think sometimes as a leader to actually own and name the impact, and maybe when you haven't made the right decision, and then reflecting that back to the team. I think owning when something wrong occurs in the workplace and then offering repair actually significantly changes the way that respect and the team works and operates, and the way you can share when issues happen. So I think that's been a good learning for my leadership. Own up when shit goes wrong. my French. Because it makes people feel safe so they can too. Yeah.
Georgia, this is great. We could keep on going, but I'm really conscious of time. So, really great insights, and certainly from my perspective, you help to demystify and clarify some of the terms that we're all hearing more of. So thank you very much, and really healthy in terms of some of the reflection of the work that we do as well. So. If people want to learn more, how do they get in contact with you, or if people are interested, with piques some interest, and people say, hey, I want to learn some more. What are some next steps, do you think?
Okay, so if you want some mentoring that
Yep.
can help you delve deeper into understanding what you need to do in your small business,
Yep.
but also then if you want to learn the compliance and get it all right and you're engaged in your knowledge and training journey, go to
Yep.
the Psychological Health Code on the WorkSafe website.
Yep.
There'll also be free webinars coming across from Comcare, WorkSafe Victoria, and New
Yep.
South Wales Safe. They're really in depth around the compliance and the legislation. And then there's
Yep.
also a company called Flourish Stick C, which also has free webinars and training that you can do.
Yep. Great.
Yeah.
Terrific. Sue, key takeaways. I think you and I were both taking notes at the same time around that
Correct.
about George's fast
Yes.
five, or foundational five. So what were your insights from today's discussion?
I thought, it always comes back to why, and I thought that's a really, really significant reminder, because sometimes you forget that. But I wrote down open, trust, communication, respect, sort of the foundations of leadership, and I think
Mhm.
that was helpful. But probably the biggest takeaway is owning the decision.
Mhm.
We're imperfect. We're all imperfect, and we're always going to make mistakes or do something maybe for the best of intentions, but it has unintended consequences.
Mhm.
But owning those decisions, and then being, I suppose, strong enough and self-aware enough to be able to say, actually, guys, I've made a bit of a mistake here. We need to do some walking back, or we need to
Yeah.
shift. And I thought that was a really great call out to people. Don't have to be perfect. You can be imperfect. You've just got to own and have that self-awareness to appreciate it. So thank you. That was a great reminder.
Cool. Georgia, thank you so much. Really interesting, really insightful, and yeah, very much enjoyed talking to you. So thank you very much for your time today.
Oh,
And
thank you so much.
no worries, thank you. And Sue and I look forward to bringing you our next edition of On My Couch. In the meantime, you want to learn more about IMC Group and the work we do, we're on the web, omc-group.com.au. I was so proud of saying I've had this business for 15 years and I can't even get the website right. omc-group.com.au. So, Sue, thank you. Good to see you. Georgia, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on here today.
Cheers.